We've talked about communication failures, but what most people don't realize is that they don't happen all at one time. Typically, it actually happens in layers. First, the network becomes slower, then messages become delayed, calls start failing, and then parts of the system stop working, well, entirely. And because most people picture an actual disaster, such as a total and immediate blackout like they see in the movies, they don't realize that there's a problem. Now you're competing with thousands of other people trying to do communication all at the same time. But what I want to explain is actually what happens when communication infrastructures begin to fail and why understanding this can help you make better decisions before an emergency occurs. When having discussions with other people, one of the biggest questions that come up is, Bill, what qualifies you to understand how this works? Did you work for the FCC? Did you work for a cell phone company? Did you? No. That's not the case. I actually work for a level 3 or a tier 3 emergency communication company. This means that we were third in line when communications were restored. It means presidential, all the communications that involve that, major federal departments such as the FBI, CIA, NSA, FCC, pick an acronym, doesn't matter, then tier 3. This means that information that trickled down from above then can be disseminated out to the public just as it needed to be initially. But one of the biggest myths in preparedness is that communication systems either work or they actually don't. The reality is much messier. Most communication systems actually degrade before they fail. So understanding this process helps you to build a better emergency communications plan. So let's break this into layers. The first one is actually congestion. Nothing's broken, nothing's damaged. Everyone simply wants information at the same time. Think about severe weather, wildfire, large accident, regional emergency. Thousands of people are immediately reaching for their phones. They call family, they check social media, they start searching for information. While the infrastructure still exists, the demand suddenly exceeds capacity. This means that the system is overwhelmed, and we've all seen this in one form or another. This is why text messages often succeed when voice calls don't. Text messages require far less capacity because it's data, not two-way communication. To dive a little deeper into the technology part, and some of you may want to skip over this, text messaging is sent to the closest distribution point. It sits there until it can be delivered. Voice calling requires an immediate delivery endpoint. That delivery is waiting for that other person to pick up the phone. So what you get is typically a busy signal or what's perceived as a drop call. Text messaging is based on SMS protocols. Now, you may hear all the different other acronyms and things of that nature, but this is the main protocol that it's based on. There are other technologies that actually utilize that same SMS protocol. Facebook Messenger, where the actual distribution point holds the message until someone else can receive it. When something major happens, consider sending a text message before making a repeated voice call, because that message is sitting there waiting for somebody to go, hey, I now have connectivity, and it gets delivered. The next layer is power. Communication systems require electricity, right? Cell towers, internet providers, repeaters, network equipment, and emergency power systems actually help. Backup generators actually help. Backup battery systems actually help. But every backup system has its limits. The question isn't whether backup power exists, but the question is how long is it going to take and how long does it last? Layer 3 is the most crucial. Sometimes the infrastructure itself becomes damaged, whether it be storm, wildfire, flooding, ice, wind, or just overall equipment failures, because technology does break down. Now the problem isn't congestion, but actually parts of the network physically don't exist anymore. Coverage becomes inconsistent. Although some areas maintain communication, others may lose it entirely. This is why people living only a few miles apart can experience completely different communication capabilities during the same event. So you need to identify alternate communication methods before you need them, not after. The next layer is one that most people don't talk about, they don't discuss, they don't like to think about it, to be honest with you. And it's actually information overload. So even if communication systems remain operational, people become overwhelmed by the information. Maybe there's a rumor, conflicting reports, outdated information, social media speculation. Everyone is communicating, but not everyone's communicating accurately. This creates confusion and poor decision making. So slow down, Identify your trusted sources of information before the emergency occurs. The final layer is actually isolation. Now, this was an eye-opener for me, especially where I live. This is where communication actually becomes local. People stop thinking about national information and they start focusing on the local area, whether it be family, whether it be neighbors, whether it be friends, the community, who's safe, who needs help, who actually has the proper information. At this point, communication comes less about technology and more about relationships. Where the eye-opening piece is, the strongest communication may not be on your phone. It may be the people around you. So know who lives near you, who you can rely on, and who can rely on you. Not always are they the same people. Now, in these layers, did you notice something? Throughout the entire discussion, the biggest threat wasn't technology, it was the dependence on a single method of communication. People assume their phone will always work, or their radio, or they'll always have internet. But resilient communication systems actually use layers: primary methods, backup methods, analog methods, meeting locations, communication plans. Sound familiar? Because every system eventually has limitations. Look, reality is this: the communications infrastructure rarely fails all at once. It usually fails in layers. So you've got congestion, power problems, infrastructure damage, information overload, and isolation. The people who communicate best during emergencies aren't necessarily the people with the most equipment. They're the people who actually understand how the systems fail and have already planned for those failures. Because communication preparedness isn't about predicting the emergency, it's about reducing surprises when the actual emergency happens.